Hello and welcome to this review of my Ortek MCK-84 and its accompanying keypad, the external keypad. Okay then. As you can see on this quick reference card, Ortek themselves called it the minikb and the accompanying numpad the minipad, and on the back it even has an explanation of the model number and what its suffixes mean. However, this model number is not referred to anywhere on the keyboard, strangely enough. This was a donation, thanks again May. As you can see, some of the caps are a different colour, those are in fact the originals and they belong to this banana yellow case. But the less yellowed caps are from another MCK-84, so even though it's been modified, it's only been modified with original parts, which is good for reviewing purposes. I reviewed this keyboard's big battlecruiser brother, the MCK-142 Pro, a while ago, and there will also be a video on its well-known full-size sibling, the MCK-101, at some point in the future. The MCK-84 does indeed have 84 keys, and it falls in the category of 75% keyboards, meaning that it's a condensed form factor not much bigger than a 60%, but with a lot more keys jammed into it. 75% keyboards don't have a standard layout and can vary a lot, so it's actually one of the more interesting form factors in my opinion. This one's layout is really not that bad. Most 75% layouts cram so many buttons in there that a lot of them become very small, but this one still has an acceptable sized right shift, a full-sized backspace, and normal-sized modifiers, probably helped by the fact that it doesn't have Windows keys. The WinKey version of this uses single unit buttons for all bottom row keys, apart from the spacebar, which I'm sure would be extremely fiddly. Another example of something being better without Windows keys. This one uses an ISO enter key, and in fact I'm not sure they ever did a version with an ANSI enter, a bit like its giant brother the MCK-142 Pro, which also came in ISO only. Take that, you ANSI fools, prepare to be smote. I like that it's got a nice normal cluster of arrow keys in the standard inverted T shape that doesn't get in the way of other keys too much, which sometimes happens on space-saving boards like these. But on the other hand, they place the insert and delete buttons here next to the spacebar, which is just absurd and horrible. I think they should have just left off the insert key, as it's actually negatively useful in my opinion, and the delete key should have been somewhere much more prominent, somewhere on the right edge. This also gives you a much bigger spacebar to work with. One thing that's not necessarily bad, I guess, but which does take some time to get used to, is that the backspace key is not at the edge. This is pretty normal for a 75% layout, but again, your mileage may vary on layouts like this. The build quality is pretty decent. It weighs about 800 grams, which isn't too shabby for a keyboard this small, and it comes with a sturdy plastic shell and a metal mounting plate. Fairly standard for an Alps-based board, but then again, those tended to be reasonably well built. The numpad weighs 260 grams and has much the same build, and it doesn't look bad or anything, but the styling is completely different from the main keyboard, which makes absolutely no sense. Even the numpad's height and depth are slightly different. I mean, if you're going to make a numpad accessory for a keyboard, why not make it fit in, you know? The numpad is very useful to have, of course, even though I've already got two on my setup, but it uses a very bulky connector that sticks up incredibly far, which in turn means I had to move the keyboard very far backwards because the plug was pushing up against my monitor stand. Kind of a lack of insight, I think. It would have been much better if they just went with a side-facing DIN plug or something, which would have been perfectly doable. A useful extra feature of this numpad is that it also has a backspace key on it, which helps a lot considering the somewhat awkward location of the backspace on the main keyboard. I've always advocated having a backspace on the numpad, so this is a welcome addition for me. Both the keyboard and the numpad come with the same type of caps. They look almost like double-shot ABS, but if you check out the back of the caps, there's no molding mark, so I guess it's actually some type of razor-sharp rimless pad printing, probably silk screening. This means that they shouldn't have particularly great lifetime, even though these look absolutely pristine, but honestly, even with a magnifying glass, they look pretty good. I was surprised to find out they weren't double shots, to be honest. Especially since other Ortek boards, like the MCK-142 and 101, tended to come with Taiho TI double-shot ABS caps. Ortek certainly weren't unfamiliar with pad printing though, it's not uncommon on their boards. That said, the yellowed originals are actually double shots. The keyboard uses a type of clicky grey Alps clone switches nicknamed Type T8 by Alps.tw. They have kind of normal weighting for Alps switches, so around the 70-gram mark, but they are extremely tactile to the point of being obstinate and unyielding. It's kind of overbearing actually. I mean, it's not too bad to type on, but during gaming I found it detracted from my ability to do quick taps and key presses. And considering I play a lot of dungeon crawler and bullet hell games where small, quick, precise movements are crucial, this really didn't help. For some gamers, the 2-key rollover might not cut it either, although I haven't encountered any instances in a testing phase where it blocked my inputs. The rather repressive tactility might be good for something like a Numpad or a Macropad actually, where you're not really typing, and where highly aggressive feedback is, in my experience, both very useful and extra satisfying. You know, nothing like a massive thunk when you press 18, enter, enter, close, no, which is exactly what I'll be doing in a few seconds, by the way, as this is scene 18 we're in at the moment, and it's not a voiceover or a video scene or something. My Genovation Numpad uses Alps SKCM white, which aren't bad at all or anything, but they're not as ultra tactile as I'd like in a Numpad, so I might transplant a few of these T8 switches into it. The benefactor was kind enough to send a few loose switches along with the keyboard anyway. The Ortek Numpad, ironically, also uses SKCM white, so the Numpad uses the switches I'd like in the mainboard, and the mainboard uses switches I'd like in the Numpad. Overall, it's not a bad keyboard. If you're into vintage space savers, this should be a serious consideration. If you don't like the switches, it could also come with simplified and complicated genuine Alps as well as other Alps clones. You can always just use it as a chassis for your Alps switches of choice. It's not super common, but it's not really rare or anything either, so it shouldn't be too hard to get hold of one. That's it for this review. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And following is a typing demonstration of me typing on this keyboard.